Right, continuing to get stuck into this topic, culture and ethnicity. Let's go. So the concept of race, let's talk more about that. Despite what was common scientific belief in the centuries before this one, race has no basis in science. Essentially, people of the same race don't necessarily have more similar DNA than other people. So two white people might be more dissimilar genetically than a white person and a black person. So purely based on DNA, race makes no sense. And in fact, scientists have determined the environment is way more important to the differences that we see in humans than DNA is. Race is socially constructed. So what do we mean by that? Socially constructed or social construction means it's an idea that's been created and accepted by the people in a society. Yeah. So our society says that we should divide people up based on the color of their skin, and that's why it's been done that way in the past. Sociologists prefer the word ethnicity to race for those reasons, because race has got no basis in science and it's socially constructed. Sociologists, and that includes us as trainee sociologists, would rather use the word ethnicity than race, because it focuses on cultural experiences, not biological differences. Yeah, cultural experiences are definitely true. Biological differences, why do we pick some and not others, as we've mentioned before? Why do we care about skin color but not eye color, and so on? So these are some similar examples to what we saw in the last lesson. Here is an olden day version of supposedly these different races. So an old scientist said that you could divide humans into 5 groups, and there are the 5 groups there. Notice, of course, that they put the Caucasian in the middle, whatever. But have a look at all these people. Would you be comfortable categorizing all of those people into the racial categories that we saw from before? No, not really. So it's a fairly meaningless concept, which is why sociologists prefer ethnicity. Right, what do ethnicities and cultures share? Now, I think we've done a little bit of work on this already, but just to remind you, they might come from a certain place or live in a certain place, share a certain place. So like in Melbourne, certain suburbs, you might find certain ethnicities in certain suburbs more often than others. They might share a language. They might share some beliefs, religious or otherwise. Those beliefs might be an ideology such as communism or capitalism. And remember, atheism is now, according to the 2016 census in Australia, the most common belief system. More common than any individual Christian sect. They might share customs and traditions. They might share specific clothing. Now, a lot of that clothing is often more traditional clothing, so clothing from history, but also more modern clothing as well. And food and dance, obviously, and a shared history. Now, for migrant groups to Australia, they might share, you could talk about the history that they had from the country that they came from, or you could talk about their shared history since they moved to Australia, or even the shared history of them getting to Australia in the first place. So, with our example, Sudanese Australians. So, here's the place that they share. This is a little dot map showing how prevalent Sudanese Australians are in Melbourne. The language that they share is Arabic, and most Sudanese people speak English as well. One belief system, so Sudanese people in Sudan are 97% Islamic. That's possibly lower since they come to Australia, I'm not sure. Sudanese Australian, one big custom of Sudanese Australians is hospitality. So if you go to a Sudanese person's house, it's really important in their culture to share and be hospitable to guests. A tradition, here we got some Sudanese women dancing and singing, some traditional clothing there. some awesome Sudanese food. Maybe we should eat some of that in class. Sounds like a good idea. Traditional dance. Here's some guys doing a traditional dance. It looks awesome. The shared history. So Sudanese Australians shared a migration history. A lot of Sudanese Australians came to Australia around about the same time. Right. Your reflection activity. This is to be done pen and paper in your exercise book. I want you to summarise everything that we've looked at in this lesson in exactly 12 words. It's got to be exactly 12 words. And your homework, go to that link. That links to an article from the Guardian newspaper. Remember, that's a left-leaning newspaper. It's online only in Australia, but there is a paper copy. There is a paper version of it, of the UK version. Anyway, go to that link, read the article, or read as much of the article as you need to answer this question. It's a fairly long one. Referring to the representation, so I want you to include quotes from the article. Explain how Sudanese Australians feel excluded. And for my class, I'd like you to do that on OneNote.